said this new strain of the virus was highly unlikely to be resistant to vaccines. Well, joining me now is Dr. Mohammed Munir, who is a virologist from the University of Lancaster. Good morning to you, Dr. Munir. How worried should we be about this new mutation of the virus?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me on the show. So since government has announced that there is a new variant circulating in the UK, particularly in the London region, in the scientific community, we've been looking into the data sets. Those are already available publicly. Anybody can access that. So over 50,000 sequences are available. And out of those, when we look into, there is one mutation in the spike protein at 501 position that has been identified. And that position is not really at the receptor binding site, the way virus enter into our body. So this means it could probably affect onto the transmission of the virus, but literally it has no impact on the vaccine efficacy itself, because when we talk about the vaccine effectiveness, we talk about the vaccine response against multiple sites within the spike protein, and even if one mutation occurs, it's not going to significantly impact the effectiveness of the vaccine.
So that's really interesting. So you are suggesting that it means that the infection can spread faster, but that the vaccine should go on being just as effective as before.
Yes, absolutely. So if we look on to the original virus that was first sequenced in Wuhan, and then we compare to the virus that is currently circulating in most of the European countries and in America, there are hundreds of mutations have occurred, but those mutations have literally no or very little impact, except one mutation that was at the G614D mutation. That means that in the spike protein at 614 position, there has been one spelling mistake, and that spelling mistake could lead to increased transmission. So similarly, anything that happened to the spike protein that make the crown-shaped structure on the top of the virus is certainly concerning, because spike protein is not only important for entry of the virus into our body, but also very critical for the vaccine responses. So as it stands, it's not really a major concern. However, there are something that we have to really focus on is that any mutation come in the spike protein need to be tested in experimental setting to make sure that this is not affecting the transmission or the vaccine efficacy.
And this is not the first mutation that we've seen, is it?
Oh, absolutely. This is one of the hundreds of mutations that we have noticed. And out of those hundreds of mutations, there are only 108 mutations that are recurring, that are coming on a frequent basis. And that is not very common. That is very common in viruses, and SARS-2 is no exception, that as the virus circulates into any population, then it acquired and accommodates some of the mutation and become very prominent and predominant in many of those countries. For example, if we talk about the SARS-2 virus now in the world, there are 2 or 3 strains, those become a reference trait for any country. So similarly, it could happen that some of the viruses become more successful in replication, therefore become predominant and would become reference trait in the UK. But those mutations might not have any impact onto the vaccine efficacy.
I wanted to put the views of a fellow expert to you, Professor Hugh Pennington, a distinguished expert, who's writing one of the papers today suggesting that the government and the health secretary specifically, by talking about this new variant of the virus and by linking it to the further tightening of restrictions, the entry of more places into tier 3, that he's launching a new Project Fear, this is according to Professor Pennington, to justify the further tightening of restrictions. I mean, do you think that finding this new variant of the vaccine does justify a further tightening?
Well, if there are strong evidences that this particular strain is more successful in replication, it's successful in causing more severity of the disease, or it is spreading more, or would have a fear onto the vaccine efficacy, then certainly we need to do something and we need to act very decisively. But if I would have the possibility to say that, I think it is certainly an immature statement from the government to say at this stage when there is not much information available. Most of the information that we in the scientific community have acquired through the genetic analysis of the information since the announcement. So I think it is really important to make sure that this specific mutation that occurred in the spike protein has some relevance to the disease severity or the vaccine efficacy before those are made publicly announced. And if there was really a certainly concern, then of course without announcing any new mutations, the restriction has to be tightened up, because what we don't want is that a strain that can affect the vaccine efficacy to predominantly circulate into the population. That would jeopardize our vaccine campaign and also will increase risking the transmission of this virus much more profoundly than what we are seeing now.
Really interesting. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Mohammed Munir, who is a virologist at Lancaster University. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.